Another psalm. We look at Psalms 95 verse 6. We went there before, but let us notice verse 6. It says, "Oh come, let us worship him," or let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. So each time you see there's a reference to his act of creation. Now, the Sabbath is a memorial of God's creation, of God's creative act. And it keeps ever before us why worship is due to God. He is the creator, and we are his creatures. And just as long as God is our creator, this fact continues to be a valid reason why we ought to worship God. And the Sabbath is a reminder of that fact. It is a memorial of that fact. Isn't that awesome? Remember that the Sabbath is a memorial of God's creative act. After God was through creating through those 6 days, when the Sabbath came, the Sabbath is a celebration of God's creative act. Each time you and I observe the Sabbath, it reminds us, and we are also celebrating God's act of creating this world and creating us. The fact that he created Adam and Eve, from which you and I came. So clearly, the Sabbath is the birthday of the creation of this world. Each week you celebrate it by observing God's 7th day Sabbath, which comes on Saturday. Now, let us turn to another question. Did Christ change the Sabbath? There are a lot of claims that are made that Christ, at his death, changed the Sabbath from the 7th day to the first day of the week. But let us turn to the Bible to find what Jesus said concerning his law. Because God's law, we understand, is a transcript of his character. When you see the law, you see who God is. The law is who God is. It's a reflection of who God is. Let us look at Matthew chapter 5, 17 and 18. Notice what Jesus has to say. Jesus says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled." And then if you read verse 19, Jesus clearly says that those who teach otherwise will be called least in his kingdom, or they won't be there. Just look at verse 19 for a moment with me, and notice what Jesus continued to say in verse 19 of chapter 5 of Matthew. Are you still there? All right, good. So we are looking at verse 19, and we read, "Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven." But notice now, "But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Now if you jump over to Revelation chapter 22, notice what the Bible says. That's Revelation chapter 22. I want you to notice this powerful text. Speaking of entering into the kingdom of God. And notice the criteria in order to enter into the kingdom of God. Verse 14 says, "Blessed, happy are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter into the gate, into the city." So those who keep God's commandment, not in their own strength, but in the strength that is provided by the grace of God through Jesus Christ, which enables us to be obedient to him. Only those people who were obedient and who is obedient will enter into the kingdom of God. And over there in Matthew that we just read, Jesus clearly says, don't even think about it. I am not here to destroy the law. I'm not here to put an end to the law or to the writings of the prophets, beginning at Moses and all the prophets and down. But I am come to fulfill. I come to set the example. I come to do the thing that was prophesied about me. I come to live the law. I come to show you how the law ought to be kept. And then he says that not one jot, not a tittle of his words in the law will pass away till all be fulfilled. Now Jesus kept, and we understand that Jesus kept the same day, the same Sabbath day that the Jews observe, which you and I know, and everybody should know. Maybe not everybody in the world, but in the Christian world, there's a lot of people who understand and knows was the seventh day. Now, this was his custom. It was Jesus' custom to keep the 7-day Sabbath. Luke 4:16 tells us that as his custom was, he came to Nazareth and he went into the synagogue and he worshipped. It was his custom to go to church on Sabbath. You can read that in Luke 4:16. And Jesus also indicated that the disciples would be keeping it after his ascension. If you read Matthew chapter 24 verse 20, if you remember what Jesus told them, and that mountain on which he sat, and they came unto him, which was the Mount of Let's turn over to Matthew 24 with me for a moment, and let us notice this. And the Bible tells us that his disciple, and Jesus was here, he sat up on the Mount of Olives, and the disciple came to show him the temple, the buildings of the temple. But notice what it says in verse 20. After Jesus told them what was to expect, because they wanted to know what would be the signs of his coming. And Jesus gave them signs that would take place or transpire, which would be pointing forward to his coming. And also signs of the destruction that would precede the destruction of Jerusalem, and to also tell what time, which indicate what time they should flee Jerusalem in order not to be caught up in the destruction that was coming upon the city of the Israelites. But notice in verse 20 it says, "But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, because it will be too cold, neither on the Sabbath day." And if you understand that Jerusalem, this was 40 years after Jesus left, that Jerusalem was destroyed. And Jesus was saying that they should clearly pray for these 40 years leading up to AD 70, that your flight would not be in the winter on the Sabbath day. So you would not break the Sabbath in fleeing for your life. And the disciples and the followers of Christ were to pray over these 40 years that would not be the case, that they had to flee in the winter, too cold, or on the Sabbath day.